Here we go. All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is our webinar on exporting in Caseload Manager. And so we will be walking through a few examples today. I'll give you some tips, and then we will hop out to a live demo. Again, if you have any questions, there are tutorials in the support center. I'll show you where that is. And then you can always contact our office if you have additional questions at 541-345-1629. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, as you know, Caseload Manager is a program that lives in the cloud. What that means is that, there we go. What that means is that all of the information that you're seeing is available to everyone that has access to it because it lives in the cloud. So you can access it from home, from your office, wherever. However, of course, there are times where you'll need to manipulate that data. You might need to, manipulate's the wrong word. You might need to work with that data to create a report, to draft a grant, perhaps to write a letter to your participants, to draft an invoice, or what's another common example that we see? Perhaps to develop demographics, or this is a big one. Let's say your mediators are going into a courthouse that doesn't have internet access and they need a case summary. So then you'll want to become very familiar with how do you export data so that they can easily have access to the information that they need. Okay, so let's show you how to do that. All right, and so here's our training outline. So I'm down in the configuration stage. So what I will be doing is clicking on exporting. Again, this manual is available for you online. So if I'm not explaining something well, or if you want to review, you can always hop out to this manual and review it again for yourself. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to export information, and then after you have exported it, it's going to be on your computer. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is hop out to Caseload Manager and look at developing an exportable file, and then we'll look at how do you use that data. All right, so let's go do that. Okay, number one. The first thing that you want to do is decide what data do you need, right? The most common types of data that we see are case files. So to get that data, I'm hopping down here to the Cases Hub, okay? And now I'm going to be using these three buttons on the right. We have Filter, Select Fields, and Export. When I click on Filter, this is going to allow me to filter which cases I'm seeing. And then I'll select what fields I want from within those cases, and finally I will export them, okay? So when I filter, let's see here. Let's say I just want to look at my open cases, and let's say that I just want cases involving the Smiths. Some other filter options here are you can filter by referral source, you can filter by deadline, and then if you have added custom case fields, you can also filter by those. For instance, I've added history of domestic violence. So if I needed to run a filter to see how many cases involved domestic violence, I could simply apply that filter, and then I would be looking at those cases, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so I have selected the filter I want. Now I set that filter and I hit close. You'll notice as soon as I hit close, the screen refreshes. So now I'm only seeing my cases involving a Smith. So I have John Smith, Robert Smith, all these good Smiths, okay? All right, so next, I have hit filter. Next, I'm going to hit select fields. And this allows me to choose what fields within those cases I want to export. For the moment, let's say that, let's say I'm about to have a meeting with a few different Smith families. Let's say this is an ongoing protracted probate dispute. And so I've got the John Smith family and the Robert Smith family are all going to be coming in, and I need to know the status and the summary of those cases so that I can have a long discussion about them, about where we want to go with their cases, okay? So the main things that I'll want to know are the status of the case, what it's waiting on, and then any notes about the case. And then I would, on the right here is where I have my party field. So I'll also want to know the names of the people involved. You can notice as you go down here, there's also additional information. These are all the demographic fields that I've added. So if you need to create a demographic report for your participants, again, this is probably if you need to apply for a grant, then here's where you can click on all that demographic information to be included with your case summary, okay? I've selected the fields that I want. Now I click export. Finally, I will hit close, which forces my caseload manager to refresh, okay? And so now I have the correct cases and the correct fields within those cases. So I mentioned we're just going to be using these 3 buttons, right? So I did filter, select fields, and then I hit export. So the report is running for a while. It's grabbing the appropriate data. Now, every browser and every operating system handles this slightly differently. So this is going to be part 1 of your homework. Find out where your browser wants to put this file. For me, you can see it's putting it in my downloads folder. If you're doing this on a Mac, chances are it's putting it in your desktop. Some other browsers will put this in your documents. And I think you can change your settings so that I like it when it's in your desktop because then it's just so easy to find. So you might want to change your settings to have all of your downloads appear there. Either way, whatever you decide, just play with it a little bit so that it's really easy for you to figure out where your browser is going to put this file. Now, if we look at this file, it's kind of worthless, right? Pretty much gobbledygook. There's nothing really useful for us here. Okay, the data is just not organized in a way that's helpful. So what we need to do now is decide, okay, how do I want to look at this data? There are some times where you will use it in Microsoft Word to do mail merge, but I'll be honest, 95% of the time what I hear about are people using it in Microsoft Excel. So that's the example that I'm going to use today. I do have a hopefully pretty thorough tutorial online that walks you through doing Microsoft Word. So I would recommend going through that tutorial. I've taken step-by-step screenshots, and then if you have additional questions, give me a call. I'd be happy to walk through it with you. I know that there are always new versions of Microsoft Word, and so if you're working with a different version and you don't feel like the steps apply to your version, again, give me a call and we can just do a screen share and walk through it together, regardless. So what we're looking at right now is the Notepad. This is just the plain, simple text version of this data. Pretty gobbledygook. So I'm going to X out of here because what I really want is to look at this in Excel. So I'm going to open up a plain Microsoft Excel workbook. There we go. So notice, completely blank, nothing in here. What some people do, and I very strongly recommend this, if you know that you're going to be using this type of data frequently, again, if you're printing it out to hand to your mediators before they go into court, or if you're doing a monthly summary or a weekly status check-in, whatever it is, if you're doing this frequently, my very strong recommendation is to get this exactly how you want it. have the right things bolded and in the right order, and just save it on your desktop so that you don't have to keep going through these steps, right? So that in the future, you can just click on that Excel workbook and know that it's going to pull up exactly how you want, okay? So right now we're looking at our workbook, so the next step is to get the data in, right? So to do that, I come over here to Data. Now, I'm in a newer version of Microsoft Excel. The older versions had a drop down under File, and it just said Import. That was really simple, I'll be honest, I think a little simpler than this version. So if you're looking at an older version, just hit File, then you'll see a drop-down menu that says Import, and all of the defaults are exactly what you want for that import. So you just hit File, Import, Next, 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 Finish, and then you're done. But right now, we have to go with a newer version. So we're going Data. Next, we hit Get External Data. Then from Text, right? Because it saved it as a text file. Now, again, for me, it saves it in my Downloads folder, okay? And there it is, Cases. I'm in account 12210 right now, so that's what I'm seeing. Whatever your account number is, that's what this number will be. So if your account 7000, then this title would be Cases 7000 _ tab, all right? And that's because we can remember it's a tab delimited file. Hopefully that's not a piece of information you ever need, but in case you need to get specific, then now you know this is a tab delimited file. So I double click on it, and again, all of the defaults are just what we want. So you can review them if you want, but just so you know, I'm going to hit Next. There's that delimiter up at the top left here where I can see it's tab. Okay, so again, all the defaults are just what we want. So I'm just hitting Next again. I still like all these defaults, so I'm going to hit Finish. Okay, finally, this one is something to think about. This is saying, hey, where should we put the data? Now, it's going to start it in the top left column, which makes sense because this is a brand new worksheet. However, I mentioned that some people save this and they just add on to it. So let's say that you're doing an annual review and every month you put in your new data, okay? So then if you're adding to the previous month, just be aware of this, that you probably don't want it to go in A1. It might need to go into something like A20. Okay, just depending on where your previous data ended up. So again, might not be information you need. In case you do, now that little bit of info is tucked into your head. All right, so all that I've done so far is hit Next, Next, Finish. Okay, so you can pretty much just hit the Enter button 4 times and you're good. All right, so now I'm seeing my case data, right? And what I like to do is get rid of this column because I don't need it. Then I like to bold this column because I think that's helpful. So I like to play with it a little bit. I like to freeze those panes so that, you know, so that I can play with it a little bit and know that my data is still showing up if I need it to. All right. There we go. So just rearranging it a little bit. So you can see here's our case name over on the left, status, waiting for, any important notes, and then party information. Again, that party ID, that's just something that is going to automatically be exported. I don't need it, so I always remove that. Party 1, person 1, last name, first name, attorney. Then we have the next person ID. Again, I don't need it, so I'm removing it. Okay, so you guys all know how to do this at this point. Just you really want to be comfortable making this your own. Somebody was mentioning that they didn't see the participants, or maybe there was trouble exporting them. Hopefully you saw the steps that I did there and saw that it's pretty straightforward. And so all that I did was, when I selected my fields, I made sure to include my party information. and then it exported correctly. So what I have now is a list of my cases, the notes on those cases, and the party information, okay? If I were printing this out, well, first I'd probably print it in landscape, and then second, I would probably get rid of some of these fields, just so it's really simple for me to hand it to my mediator so that they have a quick summary of their cases. So this is just one example of exporting data so that I have an easy summary of information to work with. As I mentioned, you can also export participant data, which is helpful in case you need things like, I don't know, just notes on your participants, or in case you need to develop demographic information. So long as we're talking about this, let's also talk about troubleshooting just a little bit. Since this is a cloud-based program, of course we've had to put things like parameters and timeout issues in there. Mainly, if you were to run a report that for some reason couldn't run, I can't think of an example right now. If you were to run a report that had parameters in that just did not work, then Caseload Manager would continue to try to run that report and try to figure out a way to make it happen. But if it just didn't work, then what's it going to do? It's going to be running nonstop. Again, I talk with my hands a lot, so I need to put my video back on so you can see what I'm saying. Okay, there I am. Hello. All right, so Caseload Manager is just going to try to run that report over and over and over. But eventually, and so that's just going to slow down your system. It's going to slow down the servers if it's just running and running and running, right? So what we have done is put a timeout setting in there. Again, something you're probably all familiar with. I just want to take a second and explain it. So timeout means that after a certain amount of time, that report is just going to stop running. It's going to say, hey, we tried, but we don't think that this is an acceptable report, so we're stopping. Now, the problem is that every now and then, you can hit that timeout error on a real report. What would happen then? Mainly, it would say, hey, this report can't run, and it will just take you back to the previous screen. So how do you avoid that? Well, you avoid that by making sure it's a usable amount of data. We've had some people that have tried to export 3 years of cases and case history and all the attached fields. That is a large amount of data, and it's a lot larger than Microsoft Excel could even handle. So if you do need to have that much data, then what I would recommend would be breaking it into smaller chunks. Maybe running all of your cases for 6 months, or trying to decide if you really need every single one of those fields. For instance, if you're printing out in participants, you have different options, and one option is full address, another option is city only. Well, if you're printing out the full address, you don't really need the city as a separate field. So that's just an example of when you are deciding what data to export, you really want to think about whether or not you need every single one of these fields. Because if you cut down on those fields, then it means your report is going to run much faster, and the Excel document you end up with is going to be usable, instead of being this monstrous thing that's just too gargantuan to even understand. So, initially when people are exporting data, you think, more is better, I will include all of these fields. But then when it starts taking a while to run, and then when you look at this Excel sheet and you say, well, gosh, this thing is 2,000 columns, how am I even supposed to use this? Then you start thinking, okay, let's scale back so that I'm running a report to get the data that I really, really need. Okay? So hopefully that's making sense. Those are the two main calls that I get about exporting are, it's so big, it's taking too long to run, and then the Excel file is so large that it's hard to work with. Okay, so just a quick note there, you really can scale it back and export things in chunks. And again, then it's faster, then you know you're getting what you want. Okay, all right, enough of me. I will start typing with my hands instead of talking with them. So again, what we're looking at right now is the the Excel version of our cases. So let's look at another example. I'm going to create a new spreadsheet first. File, new, blank workbook. Here we go. Okay, so again, let's just review this. I hit data, get data from text, and let's see, what's another good one? Okay, so this is just a slightly different version. Again, I'm just hitting enter. Next, finish. Okay, all right. So this is just slightly different data. Now I want to have the final outcome for my participants, okay? This time I have much more detailed participant information. This would be more so if I was going to be sending them letters, or since I have a tiny bit of demographic information in here, this might be in case I needed to print a report. So you can see initially it takes a little bit of time to be comfortable with the steps, but then once you're comfortable, it's pretty simple. Data, get data from text, and then enter, enter, enter. Okay? So let's get rid of this now. We don't need to save it. Just go out of there. Okay. So I'm back on Caseload Manager. And as I mentioned, most of the time people are going to be doing this in their Cases Hub because you want case information. But of course there are times where you just need activities. Okay, so we can do the same thing for activities, same thing for calendar items, same thing for participants and for staff. So we just hit these three buttons: filter, select fields, and export. Okay, so if I need certain activities, let's say I want all of my activities over the last 14 days, okay? Or I want all of my activities from a certain referral source. Same thing. I can set that filter, select what fields I want to be included in those activities, okay? And then I can hit export. Got it? If I want calendar items, I would just go down to edit and calendar items. I can filter them, select what fields I want included, and then export. This is really useful if you want to print out a to-do list for yourself or for your office, or if I want to look at all of my calendar items within a certain case. What have we done so far in this case? Or what are all of our upcoming meetings? Let's say I want to filter by trainings, okay? So then I could just filter, and I can look at my office and say, okay, what lunches do we have coming up? What casework have we done so far? What are all of our payments? Okay, I can look at all my statuses and see what has not been completed yet. That I think is a very useful one. So I can just say for all of my calendar items, what is left to do? So I'll click not completed, set filter, go back to my list, and now here are all of my not completed calendar items, and same thing. I can just hit export. I'd select what fields I need first, I guess. Okay, so select what fields I need, probably include the staff so I know, who I get to go and yell at and say, hey, Susie Mediator, you still have this item to complete. Okay, so I'll hit update, I'll go back, and now I've got this great list of calendar items that's showing me everything I have left to complete. And same thing, I'll just hit export, and then I'll pull that up in my Excel workbook. All right. Okay, so we've looked at cases. Again, that's where most of the exporting happens. We can also do this with activities. We can do this with calendar items. As I mentioned, you can also do this with staff and with your participants. Okay. So here's a list of all of my participants. Yeah, lots. And this list just keeps growing and growing. So you'll probably want to filter this quite a bit. Maybe people only associated with open cases, or again, maybe I just want to contact my Smiths right now. You'll notice that all of your demographic information is appearing here. So all the custom demographic fields that you've added are showing up. So perhaps I need, I don't know, let's say you need everybody within a certain county, okay? Then that field would show up here and you can set that filter. All right, we've applied our filters. So now I have this condensed list of people. I'll select what fields I need. Again, I might need the full address, or I might just need the city. Perhaps I just need to contact them, so then I might just want phone and email. Or perhaps I just need to know what's going on with these participants. So then I would probably just want the notes. Okay? So I hit update, I go back, and so now I would just hit export, all right? So same thing, it plunked it into my downloads. So then to view it, I'm going over to Excel, create a new workbook, and same as before, I'll hit data, get data from text, and downloads, people. Notice that it's people now instead of cases. That's the file type. Same thing, next, next, and finish. Okay, great. So there's the information on my people. Okay, so that's the main stuff that I wanted to go over. And again, if you have any additional questions, you can always visit us at the Help Center. Okay, so to get there from your Caseload Manager home screen, you'll come over here to the upper right, and just underneath your name, hit Help, Help Topics. Under Administrators, you will see, there we go. Under Administrators, there is Exporting. So I mentioned we have a tutorial on Microsoft Word Mail Merge. All right, so again, this walks you through how to do mail merge. Same thing, select fields, export, and then depending on your version of Microsoft Word, it might be Mail Merge Manager. All right, so if you have any additional questions, please call our office or send an email, support@caseloadmanager.com. Thank you so much.